1940, the Ministry of Food sent a pamphlet to every household in Britain with step-by-step instructions for preserving meat without refrigeration. It taught your grandmother to salt it. It taught her to smoke it. It taught her to pot it in rendered fat and store it in a cool larder through winter. She followed every instruction. Her family never went hungry. Today, the Food Standards Agency classifies home-smoked meat as a high-risk activity. The same technique that kept British families alive during 6 years of total war is now treated as though your grandmother was running a biohazard laboratory. Number 13 on this list involves something that has fallen from the sky for free since the beginning of time. In 1989, a private company was handed the right to charge you for it, and now pumps raw sewage into the rivers your grandfather fished. Number 8 explains why your grandmother could sell a dozen eggs at her garden gate in 1943, but risks prosecution for doing the same thing today. Number 4 reveals why fixing your own roof, something every man on your grandfather's street did without a second thought, now requires a government certificate and can cost you a fine. These 25 tricks were not forgotten because they stopped working. They were buried because somebody started making money the moment your family stopped doing them. Hit subscribe. What you are about to hear is not nostalgia. It is the wartime record of what your grandparents actually did and what was quietly taken from you when nobody was paying attention. Let us count down. Number 25. Rendering dripping from meat scraps. Your grandmother wasted nothing. After every roast, she poured the fat through a muslin cloth into a ceramic bowl and set it on the cold slab in the larder. By morning, it had set into clean white dripping. That dripping fried her potatoes. It waterproofed her husband's boots. It went into pastry, into soup, into the children's bread when butter was rationed to 2 ounces a week. A single Sunday joint produced enough cooking fat to last until Wednesday. Not a single penny spent. The Ministry of Food actively encouraged this. Leaflets were printed. Posters were displayed. Save your dripping was a national instruction. Your grandmother did not need a study to tell her that animal fat was useful. She had a hot pan and common sense. She used everything. Number 24. Using the Anderson shelter as a cold store. Today, a British family spends an average of £62 a month running a refrigerator and a freezer. Your grandfather had neither. What he had was a corrugated steel shelter sunk 3 feet into the earth at the bottom of the garden. When the bombs stopped falling, he kept using it. The underground temperature sat between 4 and 8 degrees Celsius year-round. He stored root vegetables, apples, cheese, and cured meat in wooden crates on the shelter floor. No electricity, no moving parts, no monthly bill. Over 1.5 million Anderson shelters were installed across Britain between 1939 and 1941. After the war, most were pulled down or left to rust. The cold storage they provided was replaced by an appliance that requires a constant supply of electricity you now pay for quarterly. He solved the problem for free. You inherited the bill. Number 23. Brewing nettle beer. Your grandmother picked stinging nettles in April, when the shoots were young and tender, no taller than 6 inches. She boiled them with sugar, a squeeze of lemon, and a pinch of yeast. Within 3 days, she had a sparkling, mildly alcoholic drink rich in iron, vitamin C, and potassium. It cost her nothing. The nettles grew on every verge, every railway bank, every bomb site in the country. She brewed it for 40 years. Her children were healthy. Nobody fell ill. Nobody complained. She never asked permission. Number 22. Collecting rainwater from the rooftop. It is illegal in parts of the United States to collect rainwater that falls on your own property. In Britain, it is not yet illegal, but it is increasingly ignored by a system that would rather you pay a water company £33 a month. Your grandfather fitted a barrel beneath the downpipe of his terraced house in 1941. He used the water for his vegetable garden, for washing, for the lavatory cistern. In a wet British year, a single roof collects roughly 24,000 gallons of rainwater, free. The government now promotes rainwater harvesting as a green initiative. It is the exact same practice it failed to support for 60 years, while privatized water companies posted billions in profit. Your grandfather was not a pioneer. He was just paying attention. Number 21. Home preservation, the program they dismantled. In 1940, the Ministry of Food launched the most ambitious home food preservation program in British history. It printed millions of pamphlets. It sent demonstrators to village halls, church rooms, and women's institute meetings across the country. It taught your grandmother to bottle fruit, to pickle vegetables, to make jam from every berry in the hedgerow, to salt runner beans in stoneware crocks, and to store them through winter without a single watt of electricity. By 1943, British households were preserving an estimated 12 million pounds of fruit per year. The WWI alone produced over 5,400 tons of jam between 1940 and 1945. The system worked. It had to. There was no alternative. Then the war ended, and the food industry arrived. Supermarket chains needed customers, not competitors. Tinned food needed buyers, not bottlers. The commercial jam market was worth an estimated £140 million by 1970. A nation of home preservers was bad for business. The government stopped printing the pamphlets. The demonstrators were not replaced. Home economics was cut from the school curriculum in the 1990s. The Food Safety Act of 1990 introduced regulations that made small-scale jam making for sale a bureaucratic nightmare. Your grandmother could preserve 200 jars of fruit a year. Her granddaughter does not own a single preserving jar. This knowledge did not fade. It was made redundant by an industry that needed you to forget it. The jam your grandmother made for 3p a jar now costs you £2.70 on a supermarket shelf. Follow the money. It always tells you why. Number 20. Fuel bricks from newspaper and coal dust. Your grandfather soaked old newspapers in a bucket of water until they turned to pulp. He mixed in coal dust swept from the coal house floor. He pressed the mixture into a simple wooden mold and left the bricks to dry in the yard for a week. Each brick burned for over an hour. He made them by the dozen on Saturday afternoons. The material cost him nothing. He did not need a study to tell him that wet paper compressed with coal dust holds heat. He had cold hands and a fireplace. That was enough. Number 19. Keeping chickens in the back garden. In 1943, the government launched the Domestic Poultry Keepers' Council. It urged every family with a garden to keep hens. Ration books included a special allowance. Surrender your shell egg ration and gain access to subsidized poultry feed. Over 1 million households signed up. Your grandmother kept 4 hens in a coop her husband built from scrap timber. Those 4 birds produced roughly 840 eggs a year. She fed them kitchen scraps, garden waste, and the subsidized meal. Today, many local councils require planning permission for a chicken coop. Neighbors can file noise complaints. Environmental health officers can inspect. A practice the government once begged your grandmother to adopt is now treated as a potential public nuisance. The eggs she produced for free now cost you £3.60 a dozen. She kept her family fed. You fill in forms. Number 18. Selling surplus at the garden gate. Today, a family growing surplus tomatoes in their garden risks a visit from an environmental health officer if they sell them from a table at the front gate without registration. Your grandmother did exactly this throughout the war and for decades afterwards. In 1943, there were an estimated 1.4 million allotments in Britain. The surplus was enormous. Neighbors traded freely. A bag of runner beans for a pot of jam. A dozen eggs for a marrow. No paperwork, no hygiene certificate, no visit from the council. It worked. It always worked. Number 17. How the Medicines Act silenced your grandmother's medicine cabinet. For centuries, British households treated minor ailments at home. Your grandmother kept a shelf of remedies she had learned from her mother, who learned them from hers. Elderberry syrup for winter colds, chamomile for sleeplessness, comfrey poultice for sprains, willow bark tea for headaches, the same compound later synthesized as aspirin. Then, in 1968, the Medicines Act changed everything. It required any product marketed for medicinal purposes to hold a license. The cost of obtaining that license ran into thousands of pounds. A pharmaceutical company could afford it. Your grandmother could not. Overnight, centuries of herbal knowledge became legally unsellable. Village herbalists closed. Local chemists stopped stocking loose herbs. The language itself changed. It became illegal to claim that a herbal preparation could treat, cure, or prevent any condition unless it held a product license. The global herbal medicine market is now worth over $130 billion. The pharmaceutical industry that lobbied for the 1968 Act now sells standardized versions of the same compounds your grandmother grew for free in her garden. Echinacea capsules, valerian tablets, turmeric supplements. She grew them. They patent them. A 2020 review published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology confirmed that over 60% of the traditional European herbal remedies studied showed measurable pharmacological activity consistent with their historical use. Your grandmother was not guessing. She was practicing a medical tradition older than the NHS itself. That tradition was not replaced by something better. It was replaced by something more profitable. Number 16. Hay box cooking. Your grandmother placed a pot of stew on the stove, brought it to a full boil, and then transferred it into a wooden box packed with hay. She closed the lid and walked away. 6 hours later, the stew was cooked through, tender and hot enough to serve. The retained heat did the work. No gas, no electricity. A single 15-minute boil replaced 4 hours of simmering. The Ministry of Fuel and Power promoted hay box cookery throughout the war as a way to save coal. A 2017 study by the University of Oxford confirmed that retained heat cooking reduces domestic energy consumption by up to 73% for slow-cooked meals. Your grandmother already knew. She had the box. She had the hay. She had dinner ready by 6. It cost nothing. It worked every time. Number 15. Darning socks and mending clothes. Your grandmother did not throw away a sock with a hole in it. She stretched it over a wooden mushroom and wove new thread across the gap until the sock was whole again. A single pair lasted years. The Board of Trade launched the Make Do and Mend campaign in 1943. It published a booklet with instructions for patching, darning, turning collars, and letting out seams. Clothing was rationed. Every garment had to last. Today, the average Briton throws away 3.1 kilograms of textiles per year. Your grandmother threw away nothing. Her darning needle was not a hobby. It was a survival tool. Number 14. Snaring rabbits for the table. During the war, rabbit was not rationed. It was one of the few sources of fresh meat available without a coupon. Your grandfather set wire snares along the runs he found at the edges of fields and in the gaps beneath hedgerows. He checked them at dawn. By breakfast, his family had meat. The Ground Game Act of 1880 had already given tenant farmers the right to take rabbits on their land. During the Blitz, the government actively encouraged it. Rabbit pie, rabbit stew, and rabbit broth appeared in Ministry of Food recipe pamphlets distributed to millions. Today, snaring is legal in England and Wales, but surrounded by so much regulation, licensing, and public disapproval that the average family has no idea it is permitted. The government once printed the instructions. Now it buries them in small print. Your grandfather fed his family. He did not need a supermarket to do it. Number 13. Water privatization. How they charged you for rain. Before 1989, water in England and Wales was a public service. Your grandfather paid his rates and received clean water. The infrastructure was publicly owned. The reservoirs, the treatment works, the pipes beneath the street, all of it belonged to the people who used it. In 1989, the government privatized the 10 regional water authorities of England and Wales. Overnight, a public resource became private profit. The companies were sold for a combined total of £5.2 billion. Within 3 decades, those same companies had paid out over £72 billion in dividends to shareholders. Your grandmother's water bill did not exist. Her granddaughter now pays an average of £419 per year. The pipes still leak. An estimated 3 billion litres of treated water lost to leaks every single day. The rivers your grandfather fished are now polluted with raw sewage. In 2023, water companies discharged untreated sewage into English rivers and seas over 464,000 times. During the war, every household was taught to collect rainwater, to conserve every drop, to never let clean water run wasted. Your grandfather understood that water was precious. The company that now charges him for it pumps sewage into his river and calls it a service. Nobody voted for this. Nobody asked for it. The generation that survived the Blitz on collected rainwater and public pipes now watches private shareholders extract billions from a resource that falls from the sky for free. That is not progress. That is extraction. Number 12. Preserving eggs in water glass. Your grandmother dissolved sodium silicate, water glass, in a bucket of cooled, boiled water. She lowered fresh, unwashed eggs into the solution, making sure each one was fully submerged, and stored the bucket in the larder. Those eggs lasted up to 2 years. No refrigeration, no electricity. The water glass sealed the pores of the shell and prevented bacteria from entering. The Ministry of Food recommended this method in 1941. It was printed in official guidance and distributed nationally. A 2021 study by researchers at the University of Reading confirmed that eggs preserved in sodium silicate retained edible quality for up to 18 months when stored below 15 degrees Celsius. Your grandmother knew the science before the scientists published it. She had a bucket, a packet of water glass costing 6pence, and a larder that never ran warm. That was enough. Number 11. Making soap from rendered fat and lye. Today, a single bar of artisanal soap costs between 4 and 8 pounds. Your grandmother made her own from 2 ingredients: the rendered fat she saved from cooking and lye water she made by draining rainwater through wood ash. She heated the fat, mixed it with the lye, poured it into a mold, and left it to cure for 4 to 6 weeks. The result was a hard, white soap that cleaned everything from clothes to skin to kitchen floors. The Blitz housewife wasted nothing. The fat that cooked her food also cleaned her home. Not a single penny. Number 10. Dig for victory. Growing food on every scrap of land. In 1939, Britain imported 70% of its food. When the U-boats began sinking merchant ships in the Atlantic, the government launched the Dig for Victory campaign and asked every family to grow their own. Your grandmother dug up the flower beds. Your grandfather turned the lawn into rows of potatoes, carrots, cabbages, and onions. The moat around the Tower of London was planted with vegetables. Bomb sites became allotments within weeks of being cleared. By 1943, over 1.4 million allotments were under cultivation, producing over 1 million tons of vegetables. She grew what she ate. She ate what she grew. Nobody delivered it. Nobody packaged it. Nobody charged her for it. Number 9. Blackout curtains repurposed as insulation. Every window in Britain was covered during the Blitz. Heavy blackout fabric hung from every frame to prevent light escaping during air raids. When the war ended, your grandmother did not throw them away. She lined her bedroom curtains with the blackout material. She pinned it behind the front door. She draped it across the back of the coal cupboard to keep the warmth in the kitchen. A 2018 study by the Energy Saving Trust found that thermal curtain linings reduce heat loss through windows by up to 25%. Your grandmother was saving energy before the term existed. She was not an environmentalist. She was cold and practical. It worked. She stayed warm. No smart thermostat required. Number 8. How the supermarket killed your grandmother's food network. In 1950, there were approximately 150,000 independent grocers in Britain. Your grandmother knew her butcher by name. She bought milk from the dairy at the end of the lane. She picked up bread from the baker who had been on the high street since before the war. Every transaction was local. Every penny stayed in the community. By 2020, that number had fallen to fewer than 3,000. 4 supermarket chains now control over 67% of the British grocery market. The high street butcher, baker, and greengrocer have been replaced by a single building on the edge of town surrounded by a car park. The Food Safety Act of 1990 introduced hygiene regulations that were proportionate for large-scale industrial food production but devastating for small-scale sellers. A farmer selling eggs from a trestle table at the farm gate now faces the same regulatory framework as a factory processing 10 million eggs a year. A grandmother selling jam at the village fete must comply with labeling regulations designed for a factory in Slough. The system does not distinguish between your grandmother and a corporation. It treats them identically. One can afford the paperwork. The other cannot. During the war, your grandmother's food network fed the street. The government encouraged it. It relied on it. The moment the war ended, the industry that wanted her as a customer set about making sure she could never be a producer again. Follow the money. The local food network cost nothing. The supermarket replacement is a £220 billion industry. Your grandmother was not a customer. She was competition, and competition is always eliminated. Number 7. Earth-clamping root vegetables for winter storage. Your grandfather dug a shallow trench in the garden in late October. He lined it with a thick bed of straw. He piled his carrots, parsnips, beetroot, and turnips onto the straw, covered them with another layer of straw, and heaped earth over the top until the mound stood 18 inches high. The vegetables stayed fresh through winter. The earth insulated against frost. The straw prevented moisture rot. The clamp breathed just enough to stop condensation. No electricity, no plastic packaging, no weekly trip to the supermarket. He grew it, he stored it, he ate it in March. That simple. Number 6. Elderberry syrup and hedgerow medicine. Your grandmother walked the lanes in September with a basket and a walking stick. She hooked the elderberry branches down and stripped the clusters into her basket until it was full. At home, she simmered the berries with sugar, cloves, and a stick of cinnamon. She bottled the syrup and gave a spoonful to every child in the house at the first sign of a cold. A 2019 meta-analysis published in Complementary Therapies in Medicine found that elderberry supplementation significantly reduced the duration and severity of upper respiratory infections. Your grandmother did not read the study. She read the hedgerow. She had been doing it since she was a girl. The berries were free. The lanes were open. The medicine grew on every roadside in the country. It still does. Number 5. Making tallow candles and rush lights. When the power went out during an air raid, your grandmother did not sit in the dark. She had candles she made herself from rendered beef tallow poured into molds with a cotton wick. They burned slowly, steadily, and smelled of nothing worse than a Sunday roast. In rural areas, your great-grandmother made rush lights, peeled rushes dipped in melted fat and dried. A single rush light burned for roughly 45 minutes, enough to put the children to bed. Today, a pack of 8 candles costs £3 or more. Your grandmother's cost her nothing. The fat came from her kitchen. The wick came from her sewing box. Light was not a commodity. It was something she made. Number 4. How building regulations locked your grandfather out of his own house. In 1945, your grandfather came home from the war and repaired his own roof. He repointed the chimney, replaced the guttering, and built an extension for the new baby. He asked nobody's permission. His neighbors did the same. Entire streets were rebuilt by the men who lived on them. Today, replacing a fuse box requires a Part P certified electrician. Repairing a chimney above the roofline requires scaffolding that meets the work at height regulations of 2005. Installing a wood-burning stove requires a HETAS registered engineer and a building regulations certificate. Fitting a new window requires compliance with Part L of the building regulations for thermal efficiency. The construction industry in Britain is now worth over £170 billion a year. Every regulation that prevents you from doing the work yourself generates revenue for a certified professional who charges £60 to £90 an hour. Your grandfather replaced his own roof for the cost of materials. Today, a roof repair averages between £5,000 and £12,000. The argument is safety. The effect is dependency. Every skill your grandfather used, bricklaying, plastering, plumbing, basic electrical wiring, is now locked behind a certificate, a regulation, or an insurance requirement that exists not to protect you, but to ensure you cannot do it without paying someone who holds the right paperwork. Your grandfather built his family's home with his own hands. His grandson fills in a planning application and waits 8 weeks for a letter telling him whether he is allowed to build a porch. That is not safety. That is control. Number 3. Communal cooking and the shared street oven. After a bombing raid destroyed the gas mains in East London in 1940, your grandmother and her neighbors dragged a cast-iron range into the street and cooked together. One fire, one pot, 12 families fed. The British Restaurants Programme, launched by the Ministry of Food in 1940, opened over 2,000 communal kitchens across the country by 1943. A hot meal cost 9p. No ration coupons required. The food was simple, filling, and prepared in bulk to save fuel. Your grandmother did not call it community resilience. She called it Tuesday. When the gas went, the neighbors came. When the neighbors came, Nobody went hungry. She shared her oven because the alternative was watching the family next door eat cold food in the dark. Number 2. Smoking fish and meat for preservation. Your grandfather built a smokehouse from an old oil drum, a metal grate, and a length of pipe. He cold-smoked mackerel, herring, and surplus rabbit over oak chips at temperatures below 30 degrees Celsius for 12 to 24 hours. The Food Safety Act of 1990 now regulates the production and sale of smoked food products. Commercial smoking operations require HACCP plans, temperature monitoring logs, and environmental health inspections. The same technique the Ministry of Food taught your grandfather in 1941 now requires a paper trail that would fill the smokehouse itself. A 2016 study published in Food Control confirmed that traditional cold smoking methods, when combined with correct salt concentration, produce antimicrobial conditions that effectively inhibit the growth of Listeria and Salmonella. The science says it works. The regulation says you need a certificate to prove it. Your grandfather did not have a certificate. He had a drum, a grate, and 4 children to feed. That was qualification enough. Number 1. The lesson they hoped you would forget. This is not a trick. There is no method to explain, no measurement to recite, no regulation to name. This is something larger. This is the thing that connected every single item on this list, and it is the one thing the Blitz generation understood that we have been taught to unlearn. Your grandparents were not survivalists. They were not preppers. They were not rebels or radicals. They were ordinary British people who lived through the most devastating conflict in human history and came out the other side because they knew how to do things for themselves. They rendered their own fat, grew their own food, stored their own water, brewed their own remedies, repaired their own homes, and preserved their own harvest. Not because it was fashionable, because there was no alternative. The Blitz did not create those skills. It revealed them. The knowledge had been there for generations, passed from mother to daughter, father to son, neighbor to neighbor across the garden fence. The war simply made it visible because the systems that had begun to replace it, the shops, the supply lines, the services, were suddenly gone. And when they were gone, the only thing left was what your grandmother already knew how to do with her hands. After the war, those systems came back, and one by one, every skill on this list was quietly made unnecessary, then impractical, then regulated, then forgotten. Your grandmother could preserve 200 jars of fruit. Her granddaughter cannot name 5 hedgerow plants. Your grandfather could rebuild a wall, rewire a room, and fix the roof before Sunday lunch. His grandson is not permitted to change his own fuse box without a certificate. The wartime generation was not tougher because they suffered more. They were tougher because they depended less. They could feed a family from a garden, heat a home from a newspaper, cure a cold from a hedgerow, and store a harvest in a hole in the ground. They did not need permission. They did not need a subscription. They did not need an app. That is what resilience is. Not comfort, not convenience, not the soft assurance that someone else will handle it. Resilience is the quiet knowledge that when the lights go out and the shelves are empty and the pipes run dry, you can walk into your garden and keep your family alive with what you find there. That is what the Blitz generation carried in their bones. That is what was taken from you in the decades that followed. And that is what this list exists to hand back. Pick one. Just one. Start there. Collect rainwater this week if it rains where you are. Put a bucket under the downpipe and use it on the garden. Buy a packet of water glass from a hardware supplier and preserve a dozen eggs before the month is out. Plant 3 rows of potatoes in the space where the lawn does nothing. Render the dripping from your next Sunday roast and fry your chips in it on Monday. Find your grandmother's recipe book, the one in the kitchen drawer, the box in the attic, the shelf nobody has touched since she died, and open it. Tell me in the comments which one you are trying first. Tell me which of these your grandparents did. I promise you, somebody in your family knew every single trick on this list. Somebody in your family survived the war using these exact methods. Their knowledge is sitting in a notebook, a memory, or a conversation you have not had yet. That knowledge did not die when they did. It just went quiet. It is waiting for you to pick it up again. Start this week. Start with one.